is our custom, we will start with a short meditation to help us get grounded. So please close your eyes and relax in your chair. And take in a deep breath through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And inhale through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And as you go at your own pace of inhaling through the nose and holding, and exhaling through the mouth and holding. If thoughts should come into your head, just observe them and let them go. Like watching a car move past on the road. Now is not the time for solving problems. Right now, all you need to do is inhale through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And on your next inhale, say to yourself, Shema. And on the exhale, listen. Shema. Listen. In Shema, we're listening deeply, without judgment, without offering advice. In Shema, we are listening with an open heart. Shema, listen. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Once again, welcome everyone. We are just about at the 2-year anniversary of this group meeting, believe it or not. Our first one was March 19th in 2020, right after the shutdown. So here we are, still going. And today we're gonna start our conversation. Let's see, I think this is it. Yes. We're going to start our conversation actually by looking at the assumptions. And the assumption that we'll discuss is actually this idea that we all have free will, but it's not always accessible. And so my question is just what does that mean to you, or how might you see that showing up in your own life? I'm sorry, I have to let my cat in. Okay. I suspect he may end up on my lap in a second.
I think the question was, does the cat knock on the door?
He does not knock on the door. He licks the door, which drives me crazy. And whenever he does that, I go and I let him in.
Well, my cat, whenever,
Can you put that, what you just wrote, back up either in the chat or?
Yeah.
Because I think it's very applicable for my life.
Okay, let me put this in the chat and then we'll hear from Paul. And then we'll swing back around to you, Bonnie. So Paul, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so for me, what this brings to mind is that how I can sometimes into feeling like I don't have any options. So I end up fooling myself into thinking I have no free will. I must do this one thing because, whatever explanation I'm giving myself. And so that's the not accessible, sort of being occluded. And so, I mean, something that happened just in the last 24 hours, work related, is I'm in charge of our training program now in my company. And it's become clear to me that even though we were iterating through different versions, that we were getting too far ahead of ourselves. We were trying to produce, we're a small group, so we were trying to produce more content than we could really get into good shape. And so I could really feel that the old patterns of feeling like, oh my God, we have a deadline, which we don't. But that's what I tell myself, we have a deadline. And that sort of locks me into thinking I have no choice but to buckle down. I was going to take next week off. No, vacation's out. I got to work through my vacation, the whole thing. And I thought, wait a minute, I've got a great boss, and let me have this conversation with her, and really thought about just breathing a lot. And so we talked this morning, and I said, how would you feel about putting a pause on what we've been doing so we can pay attention to what we need to really get up to a certain level of quality? And she said, I was thinking the same thing. So this is how I tell myself that my brain gives me impressions that I have no choice, but in fact I do. But that's very apropos for me, and maybe, so thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. That's a great example of sort of overcoming. I love that phrase. I think you said, the illusion that you have no choices or something, and being able to slow things down and say, hey, I do have some choices here. So wonderful. Thank you. Bonnie, did you have some thoughts?
I did. Having moved from being a full-time professional here in the Jewish community in the South Bay to a volunteer. And I think it's because all the professional positions I've had, I've been the first one in that position, which has positives and negatives. The positive is there's nothing out there that you could be compared to. The negative is there's nothing out there that you can access. So for me, I have felt particularly the last 2 years, that I couldn't say no. And the result is, and it's a bad pattern on my part, that I take on too much. And I don't want to say especially when, but it seems to happen to me more often when someone asks me if I will do it, as opposed to me raising my hand or saying, jumping in and saying I'll do it, and not being able to say no. And so I'm doing 2 very large programs as chairing them in the community, in the synagogue, the end of the month, and 3 days apart. And I finally was able to say to 2 of the nonprofits that I'm volunteering with, I need to step back. And I had to practice this. It doesn't come naturally. And Joanne's sitting there nodding her head because I think she may have the same issues. It doesn't come naturally for me. And no one's sitting there and comparing me or grading me. It's that I love what I do. I love working in the community. This other piece was Relay for Life, which is as a cancer survivor, something else that I feel very strongly about. So yes, I have the free will. My mouth doesn't always seem to have it. And it has a big fight with the brain, which says, say no. And so I was asked by the president of the synagogue if I would write this grant for the money that's available through our federation. And I said no. And then she just sent me an email saying, I know you said you can't write it, but could you brainstorm ideas with me? Yeah, I can do that. While I'm cooking Shabbat dinner tonight, I can do that. So it's a very new process for me. And it's something that I have to continue to do. Whereas like my workouts, those are at the top. Very few things interfere with that. But saying no, or I need to narrow the scope, that's really hard.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Bonnie. And I think that's, to preview about order, sometimes we can practice one soul trait to help us do something else, like maybe, saying yes too much. Maybe that's an honor issue, speculating, right? Giving too much honor to other people. And the way to get around that, or not wanting to let people down, or who knows why, I'm just, this may or may not be the case, but by practicing order, you said you practice. Okay, so you practice, you sort of make a plan, you practice, and then that can help you kind of bring that other trait more into balance. So it's a great way to go. Hey, Marjorie, welcome. We are talking about free will and how it can be hard to access that at some point. I don't know if other folks have questions. I'll just put in the chat once again so you can see what we've been talking about. We've been reacting to this prompt. Did anyone else have a comment? Or yes, Marianne.
I'm not sure how much free will we really have. I think people's brains are put together certain ways. So I think maybe we have some free will, but not total free will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's this is one of these things where there's no right or wrong answers, and that's an area where people have been debating for a long time, because I know for me, like when I get mad and I start to raise my voice or whatever, it certainly doesn't feel to me like I have free will in those moments, and but at the same time, with practice and other things, I can get more free will. I can become, that I have found through my experience, that I can become sort of more in touch with, and slowing things down so that I can bring my free will into play and not just be, reacting to everything. And just to give an update, my cat is in my lap, which is why I'm only snapping with one hand. So he's a little out of view here, but he's really, really enjoying this discussion. In theory, I have the free will to kick him off my lap, but that doesn't really seem possible for me at the moment. So other thoughts? Yeah, Marjorie.
Well, you probably already touched on this. I'm sorry I was late, but I just got home from work. Did you define free will?
I did not.
I guess I'm a little evasive on what free, I'm looking it up now. There's a lot of definitions.
Yeah.
In a Mussar context, what does free will mean? Can you, if
So
that's
I will define it as kind of being able to kind of make a definitive choice about your actions, and being free, to choose what you do, as opposed to acting solely on instinct, or sometimes in theological contexts, it's, there's fate, or God has planned and controls everything. And so really there's nothing that we can do to sort of change our fate, or to change kind of God's plan for us. So, but I'm thinking more in the kind of personal choice context. And what we've been talking about is, well, what about those times where it feels like I don't have a choice, or where I'm just reacting before I even think about it.
Oh, well, that's where Behira comes in too.
Mm-hmm.
A Behira point for me. I've really learned to just really stop before I just, is it almost like a reaction, like reactionary, kind of knee-jerk reactions to things rather than thinking about it?
So for people who, so Behira point is a choice point, something we've talked about. So yeah, it's like when we're just kind of reacting, then it's not, I would argue that we actually don't have free will in those moments when we're not making a choice. I see Karen with her hand up as well. Karen, what are your thoughts?
I was thinking that we always have free will, but that free will was designed for us to work at it, and that negative inclinations are easier to come by. And in order to have a positive outcome, that's something that we need to be consciously aware of, why we want that and how that affects things. And that if free will didn't exist, we wouldn't be able to know what is helpful or what's good if we didn't ever make the mistake of succumbing to a negative inclination. Kind of like, how do you know joy if you don't know sorrow? And the fact that the good inclination actually takes thought and work. And that's part of what we're designed to do, is to question, to wrestle, and to study, and that we can't improve ourselves without work. So it would be natural to fall into the negative inclination, because that gives us a reason to work towards holiness. Devotee.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, I think there's a lot of, that again is a nice, unless someone has another comment, that's a nice segue into maybe starting to talk about, it's about order and, that whole issue of wrestling and, other sorts of things. So, hey, Joanne, yes.
Make it short,
Sure.
because throughout this whole pandemic, I've been trying to change the way I eat, and as the pandemic recedes, there's more temptations in the synagogue because I'm doing food again, and also even at home, sometimes I just feel like, I don't feel like doing this. And on the other hand, which has to do with order, I'm trying to, I log how much water I drink and steps each day, and I started a new thing, My Plate app, that you put in what you eat every meal and how much exercise you did. And I'm trying to do that as a way of getting a little more order into my food habits and errors, let's say, temptations.
Yeah, thank you. So that's another great example of using order to, maybe help, help out with things. Let's say hi to Sandy and Bill. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, so I'm going to share the screen again. And so may I have a volunteer to read this first paragraph, please? Yeah, Marianne.
What is order? This is the trait of order, allocating a set time for each and every thought and analysis, freeing time and space for each and every affair in the world of action, and demarcating the bounds of each with set boundaries so that one not intrude upon the other. The Israelites shall camp.
Okay, wait, well, let's just pause here.
Okay, sorry.
And talk at the, so thank you. So let's talk here for a second. Whoops, all right, now we've just totally lost control of the slides. Let me try once again. Doing all of this one-handed, I'll just remind everybody, so I still have the cat. Not that I'm blaming him or anything. All right, so let me cut and paste this into the chat, because that's a little bit of a thick paragraph. So this is from Heshbon HaNefesh by Rabbi Menachem Mendel Levin. He was one of the great Mussar masters. This was actually written, he's from the Ukraine. This was written in the early 19th century. So what is he, how is he defining order? And what are some of the things that stand out for you here? This is to everybody. Yeah, so Joanne.
Well, it seems like the importance of allocating time and space for each item on your list, let's say, whether it's planning something or doing something. Um, I had another example today. I had podiatrist at 10:15 and a teleconference at 10:30, and of course the podiatrist was slow, so I had my headset on. And I said, "Is it okay if I do this uh, telechat while you're doing my feet?" And she said, "Fine." But really, that was not ideal. Like, but neither of them had time to move me around, so I just did it.
Yeah, so that was, an example where you kind of smush some things together. But from an ideal perspective, I think what you're saying is we would sort of have set boundaries. And God, this makes me think about like trying to do my homework sometimes where I'm, just kind of bouncing around from here to there. And it's really better for me if I'm just like, for 20 minutes, like when I was writing, I would set a timer, 20 minutes, I'm going to write and I'm going to give my best writing for these 20 minutes. And then sometimes I would, go 22 minutes or something, but that really helped me stay focused to just set that kind of situation. Karen, what are your thoughts? And then we'll go to Bill.
That the idea of placing things in order of priority is not totally effective without, as you said, setting boundaries.
Yeah, I can place things in order, but unless I set boundaries and actually do them in that order, it doesn't help very much. Thank you. Bill.
Our dog is about to come inside, so there may be a little chaos for a moment or two.
This is a pet-friendly space.
So it's the antithesis of order. But so I have found that if I can draw up a schedule and anticipate how my time is going to be spent, that it actually creates a lot of opportunity and a lot of time that otherwise doesn't exist, because it gets rid of that phenomenon of, well, Tom, wasn't really sure if I was going to meet with somebody or talk with somebody or do something at a particular, and it just chews up the opportunity that would otherwise be available for accomplishing something definitive.
Great. So what I'm hearing is, in your experience, it sort of matches what he was writing, where by doing this schedule, it actually frees time for you. And
Yeah.
it creates more, by investing a little bit in the schedule, you actually have more time in your life and more things you can do. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Bill. Marianne, I see your hand. And then Bonnie.
I don't understand where it says allocating a set time for each and every thought. Well, thoughts just come into your head. What does that mean?
What do we think? What do anyone have any thoughts about that? It's a good question. Yeah, Bonnie.
Well, I think because not only do I know this, but I was diagnosed as ADHD, or as we call it, squirrel. Oh, where'd that, what? Oh, I got it. What? Oh. I have to stop and say, that's not what you're doing. That's not what's on your list of things to do. Thank you to my iPhone. And finish what I'm doing. Otherwise, I am so scattered. So that for me, I don't know if that answered it for you, Marianne, but
Yeah, somewhat. Yeah. Thank you, Bonnie.
Yeah, so what I was hearing in Bonnie's answer, Karen, did you have something on this topic you wanted to add?
Exactly. I'm in the same place with ADHD. It's very easy for me to get stuck in a rabbit hole or multiple rabbit holes. And so that's where my thoughts need a boundary, and I need to pay attention to reality. I need to come back to reality, which is a whole nother discussion, I suppose, the definition of reality. But there needs to be a set time for rabbit holes.
Yeah, I took this wonderful, and what I'm reminded of is I took a wonderful class on Jewish mindfulness meditation through the Institute of Jewish Spirituality. And so there are a variety of different like meditation modalities. And one of them is they said, you know, you can treat your thoughts as like a friendly innkeeper, where some thoughts are going to enter your head and you just let them stay for a little while and then leave. And so it's sort of creating a mental discipline not to kind of chase down every thought. And I think through meditation and other things, it is possible to slow down our brain and kind of cut down on the number of thoughts that are going through our heads. I also heard this really interesting statistic about Michael Jordan, where the average person, you know, might have 2,000 thoughts in their head a day, but people who are very focused, like Michael Jordan, and this was like 10, 15 years ago, he had like 1,200 thoughts in his day. Like he was focused on what he was doing, and just he had, you know, I don't know if that means, you know, so it's also part of our differences between people that, you know, some of us, our brains jump around, and sometimes that, you know, gets you to a point where someone says, okay, that's ADHD, and other people, their mind might be so like focused on certain things that it might be hard to change, or it might become rigid. So, you know, we all differ in these capabilities, and we have the ability to kind of change them too and work with them. Did that help, Marianne? Great. Well, let's take a peek at the spectrum of order before we then we'll split into our breakout groups. So we have this idea that, like all soul traits, order is on a spectrum. And so what happens when we are kind of on one end or the other? You know, what happens if we have too little order versus too much order? Does anyone relate to this diagram, or where they see themselves fitting in? Yeah, Joanne.
I had to change venue because my son came home. I also have ADHD. I don't know if I was ever diagnosed, but I'm just so distractible. And I'm on the chaos end. You know, that I've been trying. I've read Marie Kondo, and I reorganized my drawers are nice. My linen closet's not bad, you know, but then I have tons of books and papers, and it's hard for me to get it organized. And I've done one thing I've done with my mail is like, I've been throwing out almost immediately 99% of all the requests for contributions. And if it's a survey, forget about it. Right into the recycle, because I can't deal with it. And, you know, it was growing like Topsy, and I said, no, this is not working. So also to help my budget.
Yeah, thank you, Joanne. Marie Kondo is like, should get her own, like, you know, statue in the Mussar halls of order. But she also, you know, uses gratitude, for example, to help practice order. You know, when you're throwing something away, you say thank you to it. You know, which is something the Kotzker Rebbe used to do. When he would throw away a pair of shoes, he would wrap them in a newspaper, you know, because he felt they had served him well, and he wanted to give them some dignity as he got rid of them, to kind of portray his gratitude. Paul.
Yeah, I was thinking about, you know, I have I've also been diagnosed with ADHD, so welcome to the club, right? Here we are. Rabbit holes, like there are never enough rabbit holes when I'm in that mode, like, and there is a part of me that really loves that piece of just like really jumping around. I get very creative, but if I don't actually capture some of that information along the way, which requires a certain amount of being orderly about it, then all that is for naught. But I thought also that the other, at the other spectrum, other end of the spectrum of this obsessive order, I know that there are times when I can get very hyper focused on things. And so for me, that means that I can just sit and I can spend like an hour organizing my drawers. I mean, which they don't really require, but it's something very soothing for me. And I'm not sure that's healthy either. I mean, it does give me pleasure, but just because doing the chaotic, like follow every possible lead there is out there until I'm exhausted, that is fun in itself. But this other side is also fun, but maybe that's not really the point. And only recently, Carrie and I, Carrie can't be here tonight, but I have been joining her in doing regular exercises in the house. She does it all the time. So I've been actually participating in it. And, you know, part of it is that for me, finding the time to do that, it's like, oh, it's always the last thing on my list. But there's something about setting up this process where to the Rebbe's, you know, comments about it actually frees up time. It's amazing how when I provide a little bit of order, that it allows other things to become more fruitful in some way, that there's more time there. And I don't have to chase after things until I'm exhausted. So it's weird that the two poles are both very soothing to me, but they're not really the most useful use of my time. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Paul. You know, that's interesting because I've observed that in myself with other traits and having worked with a number of people. And when we're out of balance, sometimes we tend to cluster at the poles. You know, and as we come into balance, you know, the sort of extremes start to quiet and fade away as we come back into balance. So that's not the first time I've heard someone give an example where they tend to kind of go, you know, to one side or the other. So we'll do Bonnie and then Karen, and maybe if we could try to keep our comments on the shorter side so we can get to our breakout rooms, that would be great. So Bonnie.
So I was all the way over on the chaotic side for years. And I started teaching right out of college, a year out of college. And I took over a classroom of a teacher who quit in January, not knowing she had quit. And it was just chaotic. And I realized that I wasn't helping that and that I needed to set up some really, what I would have said were very strict classroom rules, but just the way we operate as a class. I had fourth graders, and making that classroom more organized for the kids was an eye opener for me, an absolute eye opener for me. And that really led me to be much more organized, to the point, it's funny, that my daughter says that I'm so OCD, it should be CDO, and get it in the right alphabetical order. But then after teasing me, she'll ask me for something that's in a file, and I can pull it right away, whether it's an online file or a paper file. So but I could be all the way over on the right. I have to, and I could guilt somebody into thinking that that's the only way to be.
Thank you, Bonnie. That's great self-reflection. Karen.
I think that on one end of the spectrum, a significant lack of order produces tremendous chaos. And yet on the other end of the spectrum, too much order can make it chaotic for those people that you live with and work with. I know plenty of families that really struggle to make things work because they have people in the family that really are closer to one end and closer to the other. And it's not about the DNA of the individuals. It's that they're just so far apart in the way they function.
Yeah, that's interesting. There's a whole group dynamics thing. And if people are in different places or someone's super rigid, that can itself be extremely disruptive to relationships and family dynamics. That's a really interesting point. I think that's true. This is one which order is one that seems like really like straightforward, but I find it incredibly deep. Like every time I'm involved in a group where we're exploring it. There's just so many new aspects, and I learn something new every time. So I'm going to put so what we'll do now is I'll open up breakout rooms, and you'll be with someone else. And so the prompts to work on for this week is I've put in the action steps. These are 8 things, which I think this came out of the chapter. Just maybe if you wanted to pick an action to help bring yourself into order. And so maybe take a look at this and figure out what's something that you might do in the next week to kind of work on your trait of order. And these are just the inspiration. You could pick something here, you could pick something else, and then you maybe share with your partner what you're planning on doing and why that is the case. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions? Okay, so let me create some breakout rooms here. Let me take a quick okay, so let us, so the rooms are open.
Greg, I'm going to have to sign up actually to get ready for Hebrew, which I think Rachel will be at. But
Oh, okay.
but Bill's going to still be here, but he's going to be here on his phone.
I'm going to have to dial in.
So I'm just taking a break with my computer, but Bill will be here.
Okay.
Okay,
I'll come back.
it's good to see you.
Okay.
So if you
Alrighty. Well, for those of you, let's see. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So I'm curious, how was your experience in the breakout rooms? And would anyone care to share an insight you have? Again, please don't share what your partner shared without their permission, but if you had any insights about your own journey or an action you'd like to take in the week, I would love to hear it. Yes, Marjorie.
Well, for me, I came to the conclusion after my lovely discussion with Bonnie, patience for me really is it's very close to order for me. Just really takes a lot of time and thought in order to attain a certain order of whatever I'm working on. And I also, order for me isn't like as strong a midah for me as some others. For me, though, order really, I think about the natural order and ecologically and how we are so disrupting the natural order currently and environmentally. That to me would be more of a pursuit than my own home. Because it's fine. It looks good. I know where certain things are, and that's all I need to know. I know where the dog food is. And I see all the stuff. So
Yeah.
I think of order besides our own personal spaces, or I should say my own personal space, but the greater.
Absolutely. Yeah. The natural world, all of that can come under the umbrella of order. And I personally find that connection between patience and order really interesting, because I sometimes, order for me is a canary in a coal mine. Like when things start to break down, I know that, okay, I've really got too much going on in my life. But also I tend to just get bored making lists and stuff. And I think practicing patience would probably really help me practice order. So thank you for sharing that. Would anyone else care to share?
I appreciated hearing Marjorie's getting rid of unsubscribing to things.
Yeah.
Which I had said, it seems to be much easier for me to unsubscribe to companies on email because they have unsubscribe. I haven't figured out how you unsubscribe on a text. after you've sent the word stop and it still keeps coming.
Mm.
So that's what drives me crazy. I don't want them. Leave me alone.
Thank
Block
you.
the number, Bonnie. You've got an option for blocking the telephone number that the text comes in on.
Ah, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Bill.
you.
Okay, we've become a technology support help center too. We sort of try to serve your spiritual and technological needs here in this community. So, Joanne.
Yeah, I mean, before we even started, I picked unsubscribing from 10 things because I get too much email that doesn't even apply to me, and and sometimes it takes a while for it to drop off. And I have one kind of email that has like thousands of things in it. That my main one, I think I can get it down to 20 things.
Mm.
But the other one, it's like it takes so much time to do that. And then if I try to get rid of everything, then the same item on my regular email also drops off, and then it's like, oh, but I wanted to keep that. So it gets tricky. So if you have anybody has any hints on that, and then, like I said, I'd like to know how to unsubscribe to all the snail mail, junk mail that I get from charities. I keep hoping if I keep throwing their stuff away that they'll stop sending
You
me.
just need to call them, Joanne, and say,
Yeah.
please remove me from your mailing list.
Okay.
And it usually takes one round and then
Okay.
try it. See
All
if it-
right. Thanks.
Hey,
Thanks.
here we go. We're helping each
There,
other
another
clean
good.
up here. Marianne and then Karen.
I think part of the problem is we are just bombarded with all these different versions of technology, and it just feels so, to me, I guess, so out of control. Like I feel like my email is a part-time job.
Mm.
And then you have the texts, and it's just, well, I never did Facebook because I said I don't want another thing that I have to keep up with.
Mm.
So to just simplify my life in that way, I think would be really good.
Thank you, Marianne. Yeah, they try to keep us on overload, and then it's, then that free will starts to drop away. Karen.
I like having just a few activities or appointments or meetings per day that I can use as anchors. And then I can schedule the rest of the day. And even if it's flexible, I can choose different things every day that I'd like to work on. Setting time.
Oop, you just went on mute.
I'm sorry, I wasn't on mute. What's really helpful for me is to have 1, 2, or 3 meetings, events, activities, something to each day. And those are my anchors. And then I can choose different things that need to be done each day where I have time. And then what's most important are to create the time boundaries for those 1 or 2 or 3 things that I decide are priorities in addition to the anchors.
Wonderful. That sounds very pragmatic, and it sounds like it really works for you. And
I've come to that. It's really over time. I've had to figure that out. So if I don't have 1 or 2 of those anchors for whatever reason, it's a school vacation week, it's whatever it was, I find myself much more disordered. But I plan around my anchors for the day.
I'm going to have to write in my journal after this. There's been so many helpful thoughts and comments. So we'll hear from Joanne, and then I have one more text I want to share before we go.
Okay. I was just going to say that I realized at some point in my life, not that long ago, but at some point, that more than 3 activities in one day is too many. To keep it to 3. So, because 4 is too much.
I used to help people who were being overworked, and They had too much going on at their job. And I said, make a list of everything you're doing, put it in priority order, and draw a line under the third. And go to your manager and say, I'm going to do these 3 things, and these other things are going to drop off the list. And then you negotiate, and it's like, well, move number 4 up, and it can change from day to day. It can change from week to week, but it really helps because then somebody shows up and says, hey, can you come to a meeting in 15 minutes about number 7 on the list? And then you say, gee, I would really like to, but my manager has given me a different priority, so I cannot come to this meeting, which, you've asked me to at the last minute, but I can talk to you for 2 minutes right now and give you some ideas. And usually that's enough, or they don't need an hour of your time. They just need a minute of your time. So I want to share, I always like to make sure that we have at least one woman that we're studying each time. And this seems so apropos. It's from Rabbi Shefa Gold when she's writing about this passage from the beginning of the book of Numbers. And it begins with, each camp shall set their standards around the banners. And it goes into great lengths about in the east were these tribes and the south were those tribes. And it spends a lot of time saying where everybody is camped. And she has this beautiful section, and it's far too long to kind of share all of it, but she relates each direction to a different part of the brain. And it just made me think about a lot of our discussion earlier about ADHD or competing priorities, and even the free will, well, when can I tap into it? When can I not? When can I make a real good Bahira, a really good choice point? And a lot of this has to do with just different parts of the brain vying for our attention. And really, things like meditation and planning can help kind of rein in these different parts of the brain and help them work together in kind of an orderly fashion. So with that being said, let's close with a meditation as we always do. So please close your eyes and get comfortable in your seat. And take in a deep breath through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. If we give ourselves a moment to let our brains quiet once again, let's visualize ourselves doing that activity that we picked. A mantra for the week is from Pirkei Avot. First things first and last things later. So visualize yourself just making time to do that one thing, to bring yourself more balance in this ultrative order. Now tilt your head back and open your jaw and smile. Let's share gratitude to our fellow travelers who've carved out an hour of this week to be together. When you're ready, you may open your eyes.